It started with the windshield wipers. Or, more specifically, with the way they stuttered across the glass like they were clearing something more than just rain. I was picking up my wife's car from the service shop. She'd dropped it off that morning but had to head straight into work, so I told her I'd swing by after lunch and bring it home. Simple enough. While waiting for the car to warm up, I leaned over to the glove compartment to grab the registration. The mechanic had mentioned some paperwork I'd need to sign, and I thought I'd get ahead of it. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't looking for anything, and yet. Inside the glove box, beneath a mostly expired insurance card, a few crumpled tissues, and a cracked pair of sunglasses, was a phone. Old. Not ancient, but old enough to feel purposeful. It was the kind of phone you'd buy at a gas station. Black, thick-bodied, with a keypad instead of a touchscreen. The kind that didn't update, didn't sync with anything, didn't ask questions. At first, I just stared at it. I didn't pick it up. I didn't press anything. I just looked at it the way you look at something that doesn't belong. Like a coat left hanging in the wrong closet. A toothbrush in the wrong holder. That's the word that kept surfacing, wrong. That night, I didn't say anything. We ate leftovers in front of the TV, chicken tikka and rice, mostly quiet, just the way she liked it after work. She was tired. Not withdrawn, not cold. Just tired. Present enough. I kept catching myself watching her. Her hands, her way of curling them when she held her fork. Her eyes flicking toward the TV, but not quite landing. I kept thinking about that phone. How it was just there. In her car. Without explanation. I didn't bring it up. Instead, I asked about her day. She told me about back-to-back meetings, a spilled coffee, someone from accounting who wouldn't stop replying all. She laughed a little at that, and I laughed too. But it was the kind of laugh that sits low in your throat. Polite. Filtered. Before bed, I Googled. Why would someone have a burner phone? Not proud of it. I got what you'd expect: crime shows, cheating articles, business forums. But the internet isn't a mirror. It reflects your worst assumptions, not your lived experience. I closed the browser. And I didn't sleep well. The next morning, I asked her if she wanted me to take her car in for gas. We were still low from the shop's test drive, and I'd been meaning to fill it anyway. She said, thanks, without looking up from her phone. That's when I did it. I went back to the car. Opened the glove box again. Picked up the phone. It had battery. 1 bar. No password. I pressed a button, half expecting it to beep and self-destruct. Instead, it lit up. 7 messages. All blank. No names saved. Just numbers. All from months ago. The last one said simply, "Still okay?" That was it. No sent messages. No call history. Just those few incoming texts. Sparse. Unassuming. Still okay. My hands were colder than the morning air should have allowed. I put the phone back exactly where it was. Closed the glove compartment slowly, like it might bite. That evening, I asked. Not like an accusation. Like a curiosity I wasn't sure I had a right to feel. "Hey, weird question," I started. "I found an old phone in your car earlier. In the glove box. Is it yours?" She looked up, surprised but not alarmed. "Oh, yeah. I keep that for emergencies. It's old, but it still works. Just in case my phone dies or gets stolen or something." She said it like someone explaining a fire extinguisher. Useful. Rational. Boring. I nodded. Makes sense. And I almost left it at that. Almost. But something in her tone, too even, too quick, made me say, "Do you use it much?" She blinked. "Not really. Haven't even turned it on in months." I nodded again. We moved on. But that night, I lay in bed next to her, and the silence stretched between us like a hallway I wasn't ready to walk down. In my mind, I kept cycling through possibilities. Maybe it really was for emergencies. Maybe she used it for something she was embarrassed about, not infidelity, but something private. Old friends. A journal app. A number she couldn't quite delete. Or maybe, and this is the thought I hated most, it was nothing. Maybe the only thing I'd uncovered was my own discomfort with not knowing. I didn't like that version of me. The one who read too much into too little. The one who didn't trust softness without proof. And yet, the messages existed. The silence existed. The math didn't balance. That week, I didn't check the phone again. But I noticed things more. How she sometimes locked her screen even when I wasn't looking. How she laughed less at things I said. How, when I reached for her hand while walking, hers felt a beat behind. These weren't facts. They were feelings. Which, in marriage, can be worse. A few days passed. Nothing blew up. Nothing changed, at least not in any way you could name. But the air between us? It shifted. Slightly. The way a room feels different after someone leaves, not colder, not warmer, just altered. Clara was the same in most ways. She still texted me about errands, reminded me to take my vitamins, kissed me on the cheek before heading to work. But there was something else, too. The absences. The almosts. Moments that used to hold her attention now didn't. Places we used to meet each other, small rituals, daily banter, felt like one side of the sidewalk had drifted just far enough to make the step uneven. I started keeping score. Silently, stupidly. Thursday night, she turned her phone face down when I walked into the room. Saturday morning, laughed at something she read, but when I asked what it was, she said, "Oh, nothing." Sunday, didn't bring up the walk we usually take. Said she was tired. Stayed in bed an extra hour. Was this normal? Was it nothing? Or was this how suspicion starts, not with lies, but with a series of neutral things that, once doubted, never feel neutral again? That Sunday, my brother came by. Daniel is older by 3 years, divorced twice, childless by choice. He calls himself the family's cautionary tale. I call him when I need to hear someone say the unsayable without flinching. We were out back, grilling burgers. Leo, our dog, snored at our feet. Daniel took a sip of his beer and asked, "You and Clara good?" It wasn't a loaded question. Not on the surface. I shrugged. "I think so." "You think so?" He always heard it. I hesitated. "Just little things. She's distracted lately." He turned his head slightly. "Distracted how?" I told him about the phone. Not in detail. "Just found it, asked, she said it's for emergencies." He raised an eyebrow. "Burner phone for emergencies? That's a new one." I bristled. "It's probably nothing." He nodded slowly. "Or it could be one of those things that's not something, until it is." "That's helpful," I muttered. "Hey, man. I'm not saying she's lying. But if you're asking yourself these questions, you're not just paranoid. You're responding to something." I stayed quiet. Then he said the thing I didn't want to hear. "You've always been afraid of being the jealous one. Because of Dad." And just like that, I was 14 again, watching our father accuse our mother of cheating because she wore lipstick to the grocery store. Because she didn't pick up the phone once. Because she was late coming home from book club. "I'm not him," I said. "No, you're not. But you learned the same language." I poked the burger with the spatula, harder than necessary. Daniel leaned back. "You don't have to say anything. Just be honest with yourself about what you feel. You don't have to act on it. But don't pretend it's not there." That night, Clara asked how the grilling went. "Fine," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "Just fine?" I paused. "Daniel thinks too much." She laughed. "That's rich, coming from you." It should have been a funny moment. It would have been, a few weeks ago. But my laugh caught in my throat. I asked, "Do you think I'm someone who overthinks everything?" She looked at me. Not playfully. Curiously. "I think you're someone who wants to understand things before they go wrong." I stared at her for a moment. Then nodded. And we never finished that conversation. Tuesday night, she stayed late at work. Unplanned. No big deal. Texted me around 6. Last-minute call with Singapore team. "Be late. Don't wait for me, love." I stared at that heart longer than I should have. The thing is, she'd never signed texts like that before. She just didn't. It wasn't her thing. And now? Was it affection? Or was it camouflage? I didn't check the phone again. But I did open the glove compartment. Just to look. Still there. Same place. Same quiet wait. I didn't touch it. I closed the glove box and sat in the car for a full 5 minutes. Just breathing. Just trying to decide what kind of man I wanted to be. The kind who trusts? Or the kind who verifies? That weekend, we had dinner with Clara's friend Nora and her husband. Wine, roast chicken, candlelight. The kind of meal where nothing is said directly, but everything is communicated anyway. At one point, Clara got up to grab more wine, and Nora leaned toward me. "She seems lighter lately," she said. "Lighter?" Nora smiled. Like she exhaled something she'd been holding. "I don't know. It's good to see." I forced a smile. And then she added, "She mentioned you've both been talking more." I blinked. Did she? Nora nodded. Said things felt more open. I didn't know what to say. Because I hadn't felt that. Had I missed it? Was she opening a door I'd already walked past? Or was she saying things that sounded good in public? That night, I brought it up. Not directly. I asked, "Do you think we've been more open lately?" She looked at me like I'd just asked what day it was. "I think we're adjusting. You've seemed a little distant. I figured you were in your head." "I have been," I said. A beat. Then she said, "It's okay. I get it. Sometimes I just need to handle things in my own way too." I wanted to ask, what things? But I was afraid of the answer. Or worse, afraid she wouldn't give one. In the bathroom later, brushing my teeth, I looked at myself in the mirror and heard Daniel's voice in my head again. "You don't have to act on it. But don't pretend it's not there." So here I am. Sitting in my office, writing this down. Because saying it out loud feels too sharp. And keeping it in feels worse. There's a phone in my wife's car. She says it's for emergencies. I haven't caught her in a lie. But I don't feel told the truth either. So which one of us is wrong? We were folding laundry when she said it. It was a Tuesday evening, the TV murmuring low in the background, 2 glasses of wine half drunk on the counter. We'd slipped into that unremarkable rhythm of couples who've been together long enough to share silence without unease. And then Clara, holding up one of my old college t-shirts, said, "You always wear this when you're worried." I looked up. "Do I?" She smiled, folding the shirt. "It's like your internal warning flag." It should have been sweet. Intimate. But I couldn't help wondering, was that what she thought now? That I was worried? Was that her way of acknowledging it? Or deflecting it? "I'm not worried," I said, more quickly than I meant to. She said, "Just as quickly." And kept folding. That should have been it. But that small exchange didn't close a door, it cracked one open. A few days later, I visited my mom. She lives alone now. My father passed 2 years ago. Cancer. Quick, aggressive. His absence is still loud, but softer around the edges. She asked how things were with Clara. I shrugged. "Fine." "You don't look fine." "Might just be the haircut," I said, forcing a smile. She didn't laugh. She just stared at me over the rim of her mug. Then she said, "Do you remember the blue drawer?" I blinked. "What?" "The one in your dad's study. 3rd drawer down." Of course I remembered. It was the one we weren't supposed to open. Ever. Even though it wasn't locked. I was 12 when I finally looked. There was nothing scandalous in it, just old photos, papers, a watch, a letter with no envelope. Still, the way my father reacted when I confessed, the silence, the way he looked at me like I'd broken something fragile, stuck with me. "Yeah," I said. "I remember." "I always wondered," my mom said, "what was worse, that he had something to hide, or that I didn't ask." She sipped her tea. "I didn't want to be the wife who snoops. I wanted to be the wife who's trusted. Were you?" She smiled without humor. Eventually, I stopped caring about the difference. On the drive home, that sentence haunted me. I stopped caring about the difference. I thought about that drawer. And the phone in Clara's glove compartment. Neither one forbidden. Neither one discussed. Just present. Waiting. That weekend, Clara asked if I wanted to go out for dinner. A rare suggestion, usually I'm the one trying to get us out of the house. But she seemed genuinely excited. Suggested a place we hadn't been in years, said she'd made a reservation. I thought it might be nice to talk. That last part landed heavier than she probably intended. I smiled. "That sounds great." She leaned over and kissed me on the cheek. Wear your nice shirt. Not the worried one. The restaurant was warm, candlelit, full of clinking glasses and quiet conversation. We ordered wine, shared a plate of olives, laughed about something our neighbor said last week. It almost felt like a reset. Until dessert. We were splitting tiramisu when she said, out of nowhere, "Do you ever feel like there are parts of me you just never really see?" I froze, spoon halfway to my mouth. "What do you mean?" She looked at her glass, turned it slightly in her hands. "I don't mean secrets. I mean spaces, parts of myself I don't even visit much. But they're still there." I didn't know how to answer, because what she was describing, it wasn't guilt. It wasn't confession. It was longing. "I think we all have those," I said carefully. "Corners." She nodded. "Sometimes I wonder if you'd still love me if I let you into them." I reached for her hand. "I already do. Even the parts one don't see." She squeezed my hand once. Let go. And smiled like someone trying not to cry in public. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I lay awake thinking about corners, about the parts of her I'd never visited, and the parts of myself I'd walled off. Was I afraid of her secrets? Or just ashamed of how badly I wanted to know them? The next day, I opened the glove compartment again. Not to touch the phone. Just to see if it was still there. But something was different. It had been moved. Just slightly. The tissues were no longer crumpled the same way. The sunglasses had been rotated. Someone, probably Clara, had gone into the glove box since I last checked. And she hadn't said anything, not that she needed to. But now the silence around the phone had weight. Shape. It wasn't just a forgotten object anymore. It was an actor in our story. That evening, I almost brought it up. We were washing dishes. She handed me a wet plate, and I just stood there, holding it, dripping. She noticed. "You?" I hesitated. "Just tired." A pause. Then, "Do you want to talk about anything?" My stomach tightened. I wanted to say, yes. The phone. The gaps. The almost lies. The ache of wanting to trust without needing proof. But I shook my head. "Not really." She nodded. And that was the end of it. Later that night, I opened our shared photo album online. Just to look. We'd stopped uploading things regularly after the first year. Life got busy. Or maybe we got used to the idea that memories didn't need documenting to be real. But I scrolled all the way back. To the first photo Clara ever took of us. We were in her old apartment. She had just moved in. We were eating cereal on the floor. I was wearing pajama pants and an oversized hoodie. She had her feet in my lap. We both looked exhausted. And wildly in love. The caption said, "No filter. No plan. Just this." I stared at that for a long time. No filter. No plan. Just this. It hit me that night, more than ever, that I wasn't afraid Clara was hiding something awful. I was afraid that the part of her I loved most, the open, playful, generous part, was somewhere I couldn't reach anymore. And the phone? The phone was just a symptom. A metaphor. A shadow. Maybe I didn't need to know what it was for. Maybe I just needed to know whether she still wanted me close enough to ask. The thing about doubt is that it's rarely loud. It doesn't yell, doesn't wave its arms. It creeps. It changes how you hear things. It adjusts the lighting on your memories. It turns ordinary days into puzzle pieces, and you start trying to fit things together that maybe were never meant to make a picture. Tuesday night, Clara got a text at 11:08 p.m. I was half asleep, already drifting, when I felt her shift beside me. The buzz was soft, but distinct. Her body moved the way it does when she's expecting something, not startled, not annoyed. Just waiting. I heard her screen unlock. Then silence. Then a small exhale, not laughter, not alarm. Just air. Released. "What is it?" I asked, eyes still closed. "Work thing," she said, far too casually. I opened my eyes. At 11? She didn't look at me. Singapore's just starting their day. "It's nothing urgent." I nodded. She set the phone back down, screen face down, and rolled away from me. That was new. She always used to sleep curled toward me, one hand lightly resting on my arm or hip. But this time, her spine was a line I didn't dare cross. I stared at the ceiling for a long time. The next day, I went to see my sister, Hannah. She was working from home, half distracted, a bowl of cereal on her desk even though it was nearly noon. "You're fidgety," she said, not looking up from her laptop. "I'm not." "You are. You only bounce your knee when something's chewing on you." I sat down heavily on her couch. Leo, the dog, not the kid, jumped up beside me and promptly farted. Hannah didn't even blink. "I think Clara's hiding something." Hannah's fingers paused over the keyboard. "What?" "I found a second phone. Burner style. In her glove compartment." She whistled. "That's bold. She says it's for emergencies. I haven't found any proof of anything sketchy. Except the part where she didn't tell you about it." I nodded. Hannah sighed. "Do you want my actual opinion, or just comfort?" "Actual. Always." She leaned back. "Do you remember when Clara and I were in grad school together, before you two even started dating?" "Yeah." "She used to be the most private person I'd ever met. Friendly, but sealed tight. I remember once she got a phone call and stepped out of the room. We were in the middle of dinner, and when she came back, she said her other life had called. As a joke. But it was clear, she compartmentalized everything. That landed like a small stone in my chest. I didn't know that. She doesn't like to feel cornered. She likes to be the one who decides what gets shared, and when." I rubbed my eyes. "So, you're saying I should just wait? Not ask more?" "I'm saying," Hannah said gently, "if you push her too soon, she'll retreat. But if you stay silent too long, you'll implode. Pick your pain." I didn't respond. She added, "You need to figure out what answer you're really looking for." "What do you mean? Do you want the truth? Or do you just want her to say something that makes you feel safe?" On the way home, I couldn't stop thinking about that. What would make me feel safe? Hearing that the phone was old and forgotten? Knowing it was something innocent? Or just knowing she trusted me enough to tell me, unprompted? That night, I made us dinner. Nothing fancy: pasta, garlic bread, a salad Clara would half finish. She was quiet but not distant. She asked about my sister, smiled at something I said about Leo eating my sock. And then, in a moment I'll never forget, she said, "I've been meaning to tell you something. But I keep getting in my own way." I looked up from the sink. She was drying a plate slowly, staring at the towel in her hands. "What is it?" I asked, heart already pounding. She didn't answer right away. Then, "Do you remember Amanda? From my old job?" I searched my memory. "The one who moved to London?" She nodded. "She had a breakdown last year. Full on vanished for 2 weeks. No one knew where she was." I stayed silent. Clara continued. "She reappeared and confessed she'd been planning to leave her life. Not end it, just step away. Disappear. Start over. She said she had a burner phone, cash, everything. She didn't go through with it. But it stuck with me." I felt something shift in my stomach. I said carefully. She finally looked at me. "I bought the phone around then. Not because I was planning to do what she did. But because it made me realize how easy it is to vanish. And how tempting that can feel. When everything feels too loud." "Were you planning to leave?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She shook her head. "No. I just wanted to know I had an exit. Even if I never used it." We stood in silence. Then she added, "I haven't used it in a long time. I don't even remember what numbers are on it." I nodded slowly. And here's the thing, I believed her. But it didn't make me feel better. It made me feel further away. Because there had been a whole story inside her, and I hadn't known any of it. That night, I lay awake again. This time, she faced me. But her breathing was uneven. I whispered, "I'm not going anywhere." She didn't open her eyes. But she said, "I know." Then, after a pause, "But sometimes I do." The next morning, I opened the glove box one last time. The phone was gone. In its place, a note. "For real emergencies, we talk. No more compartments." I stared at it for a long time. then folded it and tucked it into my wallet. It was supposed to be just an errand run. I needed light bulbs, batteries, and a replacement filter for the kitchen tap. Saturday afternoon stuff, the kind of mundane list that feels like proof your life is normal. The hardware store was half empty. A father was teaching his son how to pick the right screws, a woman in a pink jacket argued with someone on her phone, and I was in the aisle with the extension cords when someone tapped me lightly on the shoulder. "Hey, wait, are you Clara's husband?" I turned around. The woman looked vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place her. She smiled before I could respond. "It's me, Jess." "From her old firm? We met at that holiday thing years ago." "You brought the deviled eggs." "Oh, yeah," I said, the memory clicking into place. "Jess. Wow. Been a while." We chatted, light and harmless. She told me she'd left the firm last year, was freelancing now, hated it some days but loved the freedom. "She's still in marketing?" I nodded. Then Jess said something that sounded like nothing, but landed like a weight. "I always admired Clara's ability to compartmentalize," she said. "I don't know how she did it, back then with everything going on." I blinked. "What do you mean, everything going on?" She paused. "Oh. I just meant the situation with her mom. And the job mess. It was a lot. But she always seemed composed. Just, kind of untouchable, I guess." I forced a smile. "That's Clara." Jess laughed. "Yup. You never quite know if she's fine or freezing." We said goodbye. She disappeared into the lighting section. And I stood there in aisle 7, holding a box of bulbs, suddenly unsure who I'd been married to for the past 8 years. That night, after Clara fell asleep, I sat at the dining table in the dark. I couldn't shake the feeling. Not of betrayal. Not really. More like being the last one let in on a joke everyone had already stopped laughing at. I'd known about her mom, vaguely a strained relationship, a coldness she never fully named. I'd never pushed. She never offered. I'd thought that was respect. Now I wondered if it was avoidance. The next morning, I made her coffee before she woke up. She shuffled in wearing the oversized hoodie she always stole from my side of the closet. I placed the mug in front of her. "Thanks," she said sleepily. And before I could stop myself, I asked, "Was it hard? Back then? With your mom?" She froze, then sat down slowly. "Where is this coming from?" "I ran into Jess yesterday. She mentioned that you were going through a lot." I realized I didn't know what she meant. Clara stared at her coffee. Then said, "My mom had a breakdown." "Quiet one. The kind that doesn't look dramatic unless you know her baseline." "Why didn't you tell me?" She shrugged. "It didn't seem relevant. I wasn't trying to hide it. I just compartmentalized." She said the word without irony. It was a tool. A survival instinct. "Clara," I said gently, "it's okay to not be okay." "I know," she said. "But sometimes it's easier if no one knows you're not." And I realized then that she wasn't being dismissive. She was being honest. As honest as she knew how to be. That night, I sat on our porch while Clara graded a client pitch inside. I scrolled through old photos again. Not the ones from our wedding or vacations, just the in-between ones. Rainy afternoons, half-burned dinners, her hand on my knee in a waiting room. We had built a life of moments that rarely needed narrating. And maybe that was the problem. We'd gotten good at the spaces between us. So good, in fact, that now, when I tried to reach across, I wasn't sure where her edge began. 2 days later, we had dinner with my mother. Just the 3 of us. Pasta, salad, 1 bottle of wine. My mom asked Clara about work. About the upcoming project. Clara answered politely, if distantly. After Clara stepped into the kitchen, my mother leaned toward me. "She seems tired," she said. "She is," I said. "Are you okay?" I shrugged. "I don't know. I keep thinking I should feel worse than I do." "Worse about what?" "I don't even know what's wrong." My mom smiled, sad, knowing. "Then you're probably married." Later that night, after Clara went to bed, I took out the note she'd left in the glove compartment. "For real emergencies, we talk. No more compartments." I turned it over. Wrote on the back. "What counts as real?" I didn't show it to her. I folded it and put it back in my wallet. But I think I already knew the answer. Real isn't when something explodes. Real is when something stays small, quiet, stuck, and you don't know how to name it. On Thursday, Clara surprised me. We were brushing our teeth. Side by side. Matching pajama pants, mismatched moods. She turned to me and said, "I know I make it hard to know me sometimes." I paused. Toothbrush midair. "But it's not because I don't trust you," she said. "It's because I don't always trust that I won't fall apart if I say everything out loud." I rinsed my mouth. Turned to her. "You don't have to say everything." She looked relieved. And then, like a wave catching her, she added, "But sometimes I wish I knew how." And maybe that was it. Not the phone. Not the secrets. Not the silences. But the ache of loving someone who wanted to let you in and didn't know how to open the door. And the quiet fear that maybe you didn't know how to knock anymore. It wasn't snooping. I keep telling myself that. We were reorganizing the hallway closet, the one that holds winter coats, dead batteries, and things that don't belong anywhere else but still don't deserve to be thrown away. I was on the floor, pulling out an old storage bin labeled miscellaneous sharpened in Clara's handwriting, back when we still labeled things with optimism. Inside were books, cords that belonged to technology we no longer owned, 2 mugs from a cafe we visited once in Prague, and, near the bottom, a small black notebook. Leather-bound. No label. I opened it instinctively, the way you do when something feels like yours because it's near your things. Then I saw the handwriting. Not mine. Clara's. And something in the neatness, the careful spacing of her letters, stopped me cold. I didn't mean to read it. I really didn't. But I did. And it started like this. March 2015. I think love is real. But it's a choice, not a feeling. Today I wanted to leave. Not because I don't love him. But because I didn't know if I love myself while I'm with him. My stomach clenched. The date was from our first year of marriage. I kept reading. Fragments. I don't know how to be seen without feeling exposed. He's kind. He's patient. But sometimes I feel like I'm borrowing someone else's life. I want to stay. But sometimes staying feels like shrinking. He asks me how I'm doing. I say fine. It's easier than explaining the noise in my head. There were no names. No confessions of cheating or escape plans. Just someone trying to exist inside her own skin. Someone trying to choose love without drowning in it. I put the notebook back. But it didn't leave me. That night, she asked if I wanted tea. We sat at the table, the air heavy with chamomile and things not said. I looked at her and wanted to ask. Who were you when you wrote those words? Are you still her? Was I ever allowed to see her? Instead, I said, I found your old Prague mugs. She smiled. I forgot those were in there. She didn't ask what else I saw. And I didn't offer. The next day, I called Hannah. Was Clara ever in therapy? Jesus, she said, that's your opener? I just mean. I found something. A journal. From years ago. She sounded lost. Hannah was quiet for a moment. Then, she never said anything to me. But I always thought she should have been. We all should have been. She never talked to you about that stuff? She's not really built for vulnerability, Hannah said. She's built for survival. Even with me? Especially with you. That landed harder than I expected. She loves you, Hannah said quickly. But that doesn't mean she knows how to be loved. Later that night, I asked Clara a question I should have asked years ago. We were brushing our teeth again. Mundane, unremarkable. But I had to know. Do you ever feel lonely in this marriage? She looked at me through the mirror. Then turned the water off. Sometimes, she said. Not defensive. Not dramatic. Just honest. Me too, I said. We stood in the quiet hum of that admission. Then she said, it's not your fault. Or mine. I think sometimes we carry things we were never taught how to share. I nodded. And we finished brushing our teeth. The next morning, she left a note on the fridge. Dawn early presentation. Don't forget to water the plant on the shelf. Also, I'm glad we talked. Even if it was small. She drew a little star beside it. Clara doesn't usually draw stars. That weekend, we visited her dad. He lives alone in a one-story house that smells faintly of paint and paper. Retired teacher. Widowed for over a decade. He hugged her longer than usual. While Clara helped him find a missing remote, I asked him, too casually, if Clara had always been that strong, silent type. He chuckled. Clara was born an adult. Never cried much. Never needed rocking. But when she was 8, she had a dream her mother died. She didn't speak for a week. I didn't know that, I said. She probably wouldn't remember, he said. Or she'd pretend not to. Then he looked at me. She's good at carrying. Not so good at asking. On the drive home, Clara was quiet. Then she said, "You know that feeling when you wake up from a nap and don't know what year it is?" Yeah. That's how I feel when we talk about my mom. I didn't mean to. No, I know. It's not you. It's just like opening a drawer and forgetting what you were looking for. She smiled at me then. And I realized that, for the first time in a while, I believed it. Not everything, but enough. Later, I asked if she wanted to go away for a weekend. Just us. No plans, just space. She looked surprised. Then, yeah. I'd like that. Then she said, half to herself, "Maybe it's time I stop compartmentalizing." I smiled. We could make a pact. No compartments. She held out her hand like we were kids on a playground. Deal. We shook. And that night, for the first time in weeks, I fell asleep before her. I don't think the journal was meant for me to read. But I also don't think she hid it. Maybe, deep down, she wanted me to see it. To know what she hadn't said aloud. And maybe I needed to read it. Not because it hurt. But because it made her human again. Not just the version of herself she presented to me. But the one who wasn't sure she belonged. And was trying, anyway. We didn't pack much. A weekend bag each. Sweaters, books, snacks. I brought a bottle of wine I'd been saving for no reason. Clara packed the tea she likes, the kind with little dried orange peels floating in it. We drove 2 hours north to a cabin near the lake. It was off-season, early enough in the spring that everything still looked tired from winter. The water was half-thawed, the trees unsure of whether to bloom or sleep. It was perfect. No one else around. No cell signal. No curated distractions, just us. Which was the point. And the problem. Friday night, we played a board game we found in the cabin's closet. One of those travel-sized ones with missing pieces. We made up new rules. Clara laughed when I declared that red cards were now emotional grenades. "You'd be terrible at diplomacy," she said, grinning. True. But great at emotionally confusing combat. It felt good. Real. Like us, but softened. Then we opened the wine. And somewhere between the second glass and the last bite of our cold pasta, she said, "You know what's strange? I keep thinking about that note. The one you found." "The glovebox one?" "No. The one I left on the fridge. After we brushed our teeth. The star I drew." I blinked. I don't know why I drew it. I haven't done that since I was a teenager. Maybe you wanted to leave a version of yourself behind. One you hadn't visited in a while. She was quiet for a beat. Or maybe I just wanted you to know I was trying. My chest tightened in that way that makes you sit up straighter without realizing it. You've been trying for a long time, Clara. Not in ways that matter. They matter. She looked at me. Direct, calm. Do they matter to you? Or just enough to not leave? It wasn't an accusation. It was an invitation. And it scared me more than anything she'd said in weeks. We went to bed early. Not because we were tired. But because we didn't know what to do with the in-between. She lay facing the window. I faced the ceiling. Eventually, I said, "I think you're brave." She let out a soft exhale. "Why?" "Because you stay. Even when staying feels like giving up parts of yourself." She turned slightly, just enough for her voice to reach me. "Sometimes it does feel like that." I know. We didn't touch. But we didn't move away either. The next morning, Clara made tea. I watched her from the worn couch, wrapped in a blanket that smelled faintly of cedar and old dust. She handed me a cup and sat beside me, legs tucked under her like she used to when we were first dating. I keep wondering, she said slowly, how much of this would have been different if we'd met later. When we were more ourselves. You think you weren't you when we met? I think I was a version of me. One I needed to be, at the time. I nodded. Same. We sat in that strange agreement. Not sad. Not regretful. Just aware. That afternoon we took a walk around the lake. The air was cool but not biting. We didn't speak much. Just the crunch of gravel, the occasional flap of a bird's wings taking off from a dock. At one point, Clara stopped, stared out over the half-frozen water. Then said, quietly, I used to think if I ever disappeared, no one would notice for days. I turned toward her. I would. I know. Now I know. She looked down at the rocks near her feet. There was a time I didn't want to be known. Because being known meant being seen. And being seen meant being held responsible for all the ways I failed at being easy to love. My throat felt tight. You're not hard to love. She didn't look at me. But I'm not easy either. That night, we didn't make dinner. We shared trail mix and wine. We sat on the porch with blankets wrapped around our shoulders, even though it was too cold. Clara spoke first. I read once that you don't really know someone until you've seen how they hold grief. Yours or theirs? Both. Then she added, I don't think I've ever let you hold mine. You've let me hold pieces. Tiny ones. Sanitized. She turned toward me, eyes soft, voice steady. Do you want to know the truth about the phone? I didn't answer right away. Then I said, only if you want to tell me. She nodded. I bought it because I was afraid I'd disappear. Not physically, emotionally. Into this life. Into being someone's wife. Someone's partner. And I didn't know how to say that without sounding ungrateful. You're not ungrateful. I know. But I didn't always. And I thought if I had that phone, maybe it meant I could still choose. Even if I never used it. Did you ever? She shook her head. Never texted. Never called. Just turned it on sometimes to know it was still there. I reached for her hand. I don't want you to disappear. But I also don't want to be the reason you feel like you can't. She looked at me then. Really looked. And I saw it. Not guilt. Not fear. But the slow, painful work of returning to herself. With me. That night, in bed, she whispered. I think I've been afraid you only love the version of me that's calm. Collected, manageable. I love you, I said, even when you're unrecognizable to yourself. She laughed softly. That's terrifying. I know. But maybe that's love. Before we left the cabin the next morning, I folded the map that came with the place and tucked it into my bag. Clara raised an eyebrow. Souvenir? I smiled. Breadcrumb. She nodded. And we drove home in silence. But this time, the silence didn't stretch between us. It held us. Home didn't greet us with fanfare. There were no dramatic re-entries. Just the usual. The dog yawned, a few plants needed watering, the fridge was oddly empty. Everything right where we'd left it. As if the weekend away hadn't happened. Except it had. And everything was just slightly shifted. Not outwardly. Not dramatically. But there was something in the way Clara unpacked. Slower. More deliberate. She wasn't just folding clothes but placing parts of herself back into the house. That night, she lit a candle in the kitchen while she chopped vegetables. A small thing. But I hadn't seen her do that in months. Smells like oranges, I said, leaning against the doorway. It's supposed to calm the nerves, she said. You nervous? She gave me a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Not exactly. Just recalibrating. I nodded. That word felt right. The next day, she opened a drawer I'd never seen her use. Top right of her desk. She always kept it locked. Not out of secrecy, but out of habit. I used to think it just held old receipts or forgotten chargers. But that morning, I walked past her office and saw it wide open. Inside, a few notebooks. One photo. A small jade figurine. A dried flower, pressed flat inside a manila folder. I didn't stop. Didn't ask. But I felt something loosen in me. Not because I knew what was in the drawer. But because she'd left it open. Later that week, I found myself sitting in our garage, surrounded by tools I barely knew how to use. I'd come to fix the broken latch on a storage bin. But I just sat there, staring at an old box marked Dad's. My father kept everything: letters, receipts, keychains from gas stations he never remembered visiting. After he died, I took the box out of guilt more than nostalgia. I opened it now. Inside, a broken watch. A deck of cards. A note he wrote to himself on an index card. Just because she cries doesn't mean you're wrong. I stared at it. Then quietly tore it in half. Then into quarters. Then into dust. That evening, I told Clara about the note. She was curled up on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, legs under her. "What do you think it meant?" she asked. "I think he was trying to protect himself from empathy." She nodded. "That's a generational thing, I think." "Do you think I've done that to you? Tried to be right instead of soft?" She didn't answer for a moment. "Then, I think you've always wanted to be the man he wasn't. Which is beautiful. But sometimes I wonder if that means you're still building your love against something instead of for something." That stopped me cold. Not because it hurt. Because it was true. Friday, Clara went through old boxes in the closet. I offered to help. She shook her head. "I need to do this one alone." So I took the dog for a walk. Bought milk. Scrolled too long on my phone in the car before going inside. When I came back, she had a small pile of things beside her: old journals, a faded concert ticket, a necklace she never wore but never threw out. She looked up. I'd been carrying these pieces like puzzle edges. But I'd never looked at the picture they made. I sat beside her. "What do you see?" Someone who thought love meant fitting into small shapes. I reached for her hand. "You don't have to shrink for me." "I know," she whispered. "But sometimes I forget." That night, we made pancakes for dinner. Laughed when we burned the first batch. She wore my hoodie again. And I, for the first time in weeks, didn't feel like I had to watch her closely to know where she stood. In bed, she turned to me and said, "You know that burner phone? I think I bought it because I didn't trust myself to stay." I nodded. "And now? I don't want to leave. But I also don't want to disappear inside this life." "You won't." She hesitated. "Promise?" "I can't promise the world won't try to pull you under. But I can promise I'll reach every time you drift." Her eyes softened. "That's the best kind of promise." Later, I wrote in my notes app. Just a phrase. She left the drawer open. Not a metaphor. A timestamp. A moment of return. We didn't fix everything, that wasn't the goal. But I think for the first time, we stopped building our love out of apology. And started building it out of presence. Here. Now. Drawer open. Door cracked. Room enough for both of us. It started with a text from Nina, Clara's old roommate from before we met, the kind of friend who drifts in and out of life like a comet, dazzling, loud, warm, and occasionally chaotic. I'd met her only a handful of times, but Clara always said she was one of the only people who really got her, whatever that meant. "Guess who's in town?" Clara said, holding up her phone with a smile that looked half nervous. "Oh boy," I said. "The Nina? She wants to grab coffee tomorrow. Just a quick catch-up. You okay with that?" "Why wouldn't I be?" She shrugged. "I don't know. You've always said she was intense." I said she was a walking confessional with no filter. Which, to be fair, is accurate. Clara laughed. "True. But sometimes, that's what makes her useful." The next afternoon, I was reading on the porch when Clara got home. She didn't come out right away. I heard the front door open, close. Her footsteps paused in the hallway. Then the sound of her bag dropping, keys clinking into the bowl. The sounds of a pause, not tired, not rushed. Just deliberate. When she finally stepped onto the porch, I looked up from my book. "How was Nina?" Clara sat beside me and exhaled into her tea before answering. "She's exactly the same. Louder than appropriate. Smells like vanilla and unfinished plans." I smiled. "That checks out." She asked how we're doing. "What did you say?" "That we're learning how to talk again." I nodded. "She liked that," Clara added. "Said most people never even start." We sat in silence for a few moments. Then she said. "She asked if I ever told you about the night I almost left." My stomach tightened. I closed my book. "You haven't." Clara looked down at her hands. "It wasn't dramatic. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't book a hotel. I just drove around for hours. I ended up at her apartment, slept on her couch. We drank cheap wine and watched reruns of cooking shows until we passed out. Why didn't you tell me? Because by the next morning, I didn't want to leave anymore. And I thought if I told you, it would make it real. It would put something in your head that might not leave. Like a crack, even if it didn't break. I stayed quiet. I know that's not fair, she added. I just didn't know how to tell you. I wavered. You don't owe me perfection, Clara. I know. But I owe you truth. Later that night, after she went to bed, I found myself staring at the ceiling again. Thinking about what Nina had stirred up. The night she almost left. The night I'd probably thought everything was fine. What other nights had felt like endings to her, while I was just making dinner? What private storms had I missed, while polishing the calm surface of our routine? It didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like distance, the kind that grows quietly, like mold under paint. The next day, I ran into Nina. Total accident. She was at the bookstore, browsing the poetry section. Oh hey, stranger, she said, throwing her arms out like a musical number was about to start. We chatted awkwardly for a few minutes. She was still Nina, all limbs and declarations, smelling like some kind of herbal candle. Then she said, you know, I've always liked you. You're very measured, still waters and all that. Thanks? I said, unsure of the intent. She leaned closer. But still waters run deep, right? Or do they just hide things well? I stared at her. Then she said, softer, Clara was scared. Not of you. Of disappearing. I know. She never needed rescuing. Just witnessing. I try. I know, she said. That's why she's still there. That night, I told Clara I'd run into Nina. She didn't seem surprised. She always leaves breadcrumbs, she said. I think she likes the mess more than the solution. I asked, carefully, do you think she was right? About me hiding things? Clara tilted her head. I think you learned early on that the best way to survive was to be the calm one. And that's bad? No. But sometimes I think you mistake silence for safety. I nodded. Then asked, are you afraid of me? No. Pause. I'm afraid of not knowing what's happening behind your eyes. The next morning, I left her a note. You don't have to tell me everything, but if you ever want to be messy, I can hold that too. She left her own. Thank you. I'm learning that mess isn't failure, just life with the lights on. Later that week, we went for a walk after dinner. It was starting to get warm again, that early spring kind of warmth that makes your skin remember things you didn't know it missed. We passed a couple arguing quietly on a bench. Nothing loud, just closed expressions and clipped gestures. Clara glanced at them and said, I used to think that was the worst thing, arguing in public, and now I think the worst thing is never getting loud about what matters. Do you think we do that? We used to whisper around the fire. And now? She looked at me. Now I think we're learning to sit closer to it. We didn't talk about the burner phone again. There was nothing more to say. It wasn't about that anymore. It was about everything under it. About trust that isn't a yes or no question, but a muscle that atrophies when unused. About intimacy that doesn't mean always agreeing, but always showing up. About learning to say, I almost left. And hearing, I'm glad you didn't. Without flinching. Our anniversary landed on a Wednesday. We'd both forgotten, at first, or maybe half forgotten. Life had been full lately, not busy in the chaotic way, but in the kind of full that hums low in the background. Work, routines, small repairs. A life that moves even when you're not looking. I remembered that morning while pouring coffee. Clara was still upstairs, shower running. I stared at the calendar, the tiny number circled in faded red pen from months ago. I didn't feel panic. Just a strange, warm ache. 8 years. Not perfect years. Not clean ones. But real. I made breakfast. Nothing fancy, toast, eggs, the last of the strawberry jam she likes but always forgets to buy more of. I placed everything on the table like it meant something. Because it did. When she came downstairs, hair still damp, sweater sleeves too long, I simply said, Happy Wednesday. She blinked. Then smiled. Then, happy us. We sat, ate in silence, shared the paper. Her leg brushed mine under the table and didn't move away. After the dishes, she handed me an envelope. No name. No decoration. Just white and sealed. I wasn't sure if I'd give it to you, she said. Wrote it months ago. Never quite knew when. I opened it slowly. Inside, her handwriting. Neat, firm. Dear you. I used to think love was measured in certainty. In the things we could promise. In the things we'd never do. But that kind of love always felt like a test. What I feel now, this strange, quiet, scarred thing. It isn't perfect. It isn't safe. But it's real. And I want to keep building it with you. Even if we drop things. Even if we get it wrong sometimes. I don't need you to be unshakable. I need you to stay. And to let me stay, too. See? I folded it gently. Placed it in my wallet, where the glovebox note used to be. Clara watched me. Do you hate it? She asked softly. I think it's the truest thing anyone's ever said to me. She let out a breath. One of those unspooling kind of exhales that makes your shoulders drop, your heart loosen. Later that day, we went for a walk. Same path as always. The one behind our neighborhood with the creek and the crooked bench. We passed the tree she once named the reluctant oak because it bloomed 2 weeks late every spring. She touched its trunk. It's early this year, she said. Maybe it's learning. Maybe we all are. At home, I dug out our wedding album. We hadn't opened it in years. The spine crackled slightly when I pulled it from the shelf. We flipped through it on the floor like teenagers. She pointed to one photo, her laughing, head thrown back, a smear of cake on my cheek. I used to be afraid I'd never be her again, she said. You're not. I know. Then she turned a few pages and said. But I think I might like who I'm becoming more. I didn't say anything, just reached for her hand and held it like it was something I'd just been given. That night, we sat on the porch. 2 cups of tea. No music, just wind. And then she asked, what do you think our love looks like now? I thought for a moment. Then said. A drawer left open. A note that's been read. A hand that still reaches. She smiled. Quietly. That sounds like hope. No, I said. That sounds like us. Before bed, I added one final line to my notes app. The one where I'd been recording things, quietly, for months. It never had to be perfect. It just had to be honest. And brave. And still here. We never fixed the scratch on the car. The one near the glove compartment. It's small, but noticeable if you know where to look. Sometimes, I run my fingers over it. Not because it bothers me. Because it reminds me. Of how close we came to closing doors. Of how easy it is to disappear inside a life you love. Of how hard and holy it is to choose to stay in it. A week later, I walked into her office to find the drawer open again. This time, inside, was a single slip of paper. Nothing fancy. Just a line. You can read anything. You've earned the whole page. I didn't read more. I didn't need to. I closed the drawer gently. Left it unlocked. And went to find her. Not to say thank you. Not to say anything profound. Just to sit beside her. Like you do when someone's given you a home in the middle of the storm.